Welcome to Dead Kid Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm bringing you a review of Erin House of Salt and Sorrows. But Judith, I thought you were only going to review books that had 5 stars. Yeah, but this one's only 4 stars. You only gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I know. You're a liar. Authenticity is key. Calm down. Yes, I did rate this 4 stars rather than 5, spoiling the ending for you, but I thought I would give this book a complete dedicated review because this may be the most me book I've ever read. Certainly the most me book I've read in a long time. Disclaimer, if there are any spoilers, I don't quite know where I'm going to go with this review yet, but if there are any spoilers, I will put skips in the description below so that you can avoid any of them, and I will make sure to give you a vocal warning as well. Erin is an American author. She's currently based in Michigan. This was her first novel back in August of 2019. She does have another book coming out next autumn, I believe. She has a BFA in theatre production, which, having read this now, makes so much sense. And apparently she also enjoys embroidery, typewriters and basketball, which is less relevant to this review, but hey, it's nice to have hobbies. House of Salt and Sorrows is a YA fantasy retelling that I would say leans into the spooky side of things without going full horror. It's a ghost story, but you're not going to end up going to bed with a weapon under your pillow. My weapon of choice would be rolling pin, for what it's worth. It is a retelling, which are still being published, and were still being published in August of 2019 when this came out. But I think the big YA retelling storm happened in kind of 2018, if I'm remembering correctly, which is not relevant right now, but may become relevant later. For a bit of context, I received this book in April of this year, I think, from the lovely Justine over at I Should Read That. I will link her below. And then I read it as part of my Book a Day in June reading challenge in June. For context of kind of like my reading around this time, because I think that's sometimes quite important or interesting, I have felt like I've been in a bit of a YA slump for most of this year, but more on that as we go through. But what is the book about? House of Salt and Sorrows is a 12 dancing princesses retelling with a spooky lean. We have a spooky manor by the sea called Highmoor, where our main character Annalie lives with her father, her stepmother and her sisters. At one point there were 12 of them. But it's said that Highmoor and the family are cursed because gradually the sisters are being seemingly picked off one by one in a series of accidents? ? Annalie starts to suspect that there might be more to these deaths than just tragic accidents and begins to investigate. All while her sisters are sneaking out at night and wearing through copious pairs of shoes with little to no explanation, dancing until dawn at strange parties. So it's a mystery story, a murder story, a ghost story, a haunted house story, and a retelling, all rolled into one. What did I like? I really liked the setting. Is anyone surprised that I enjoyed a book that is set by the sea? I don't think anyone should be. What I really liked about this was that Erin had thought about the kind of traditions of this setting. So the book opens on the burial of one of Annalie's sisters, and it's a very specific kind of burial. And if you know me, you know that burial traditions are kind of my jam, so that was really cool. But there's a lot of other stuff thrown in there. So alongside that, there's the idea that inheritance works slightly differently in, I can't remember what the town is called, but the place is Highmoor. Inheritance works differently, and it's an acknowledgement that they do things slightly differently to the mainland, and the clash of culture there is really interesting. So yeah, the small town culture of it was really thought about. Alongside that comes the world building. There were some aspects to the world building that I didn't like. I will come on to those later. But things that I did enjoy, I think anyone who reads YA fantasy is reading because they were one of those kids that looked for secret doors to magical parties in their back garden, or whatever you were looking through behind your mystical door. And this is one of those books in a way, and I think that's really interesting and it's really well done. And that tied into a lot of the stuff that I'll come on to in a moment, makes the world building, it feels very complete, with one exception, which we will come on to later. I also really enjoyed the retelling aspect. 12 Dancing Princesses is probably my favourite fairy tale, I think. I had a big kind of hardback, not chunky but thin book of fairy tales that had pictures throughout, and I must have read it about 100 times, and the 12 Dancing Princesses was my favourite. I have a recollection of my mum making me one of those like cone hats with the fabric coming out of the top for a school fancy dress day. I did not have 11 friends, but I wore that costume anyway. Maybe I was the final remaining dancing princess. What's interesting about taking that fairy tale and turning it around to be from one of the female perspectives is you kind of have to do something different with the way that that fairy tale ends. And I think this book does it really well, and it tackles the fact that most of that fairy tale is about the mystery being about the girls. But if you solve that mystery, because it's the girl that it's happening to as your main character, you have to create new intrigue, and this book does that really well. What I also appreciated was that this isn't just a straight retelling of the beats of that story. It's doing something very different, and there's a different plot alongside, because you have this ghost story plot happening as well, and haunted house stuff. And what I enjoyed was that actually that ties in pretty seamlessly because of the way that Erin A. Craig constructs this story. I think it helps that 12 Dancing Princesses is quite a simple fairy tale and not too well known, and the actual story is much more of kind of an anecdote almost being told rather than these are the characters that we know and love. It's 12 princesses that aren't even really named. So it gives you a lot of scope to be very flexible about it, and you just have to fit in, there are 12 princesses, they're dancing and they're wearing 3 shoes, and that's basically all you need to know. And within that you can have, or without that I suppose, no, beyond that, that's the word I'm looking for, you can have a lot of flexibility. So you can turn it into a haunted house story and it fits in seamlessly, it works really well. The spooky aspect. This book is spooky. I said it at the beginning. Maybe I'll do a counter of how many times I've said the word spooky. But it's also dark, and it's not a scary story in a hide behind the covers horror film kind of way, because if it was, I wouldn't have read it. It's unsettling and it's eerie, and I think part of the reason that works is there is a lot of contrast in this book. So you have beautiful descriptions of the ball gowns that these girls are wearing and the gorgeous outfits they're donning and the balls that they're going to are absolutely fabulous, and then but that same gorgeous description is used on the more kind of horrific elements of the story. It creates such wonderful contrast, and it's really powerful. The shift in tone is just good. I also really liked the contrast between this very empty, enormous house that's gradually growing emptier as the curse kind of plays out, and these huge bustling balls full of people that they're going to. Atmosphere. I feel like I've talked about this a lot recently because of this book. This is a book that made me realise how important atmosphere is for me as a reader. Was this book perfect? No. Did it have the most amazing, unique plot in the universe? No. Were there some quite significant plot holes that I'll come on to later? Yeah, maybe. Did I forgive pretty much every sin because I was so obsessed with the atmosphere in this book? Yeah, I did. I could just so vividly picture this horrible, empty, haunted manor by the sea and that kind of ever-present danger of storms and shipwreck and all of that good stuff. I could picture it so clearly in my head, and it just worked. And maybe that's because that's a setting that I love and enjoy, but yeah, it just worked for me. The atmosphere in this book is stellar. I've already mentioned the descriptive writing, but it's really good, and it all comes together to make that atmosphere, and it just, it's good stuff, and I'm waffling, so I'm going to keep going. So those are the things I liked. What are the things that I would change? I think, firstly, I would have made it clearer what is and isn't possible, and this is a sin in a lot of YA fantasy, because you don't have huge amounts of space to get your setting clear. And so quite often they'll want to jump in with the action and introduce you to the characters, and you don't quite get the same introduction to the setting or to the magic in the world. So in this, it did the thing that does bother me most of the time, where it's unclear, and I think I'm still not quite clear, a reread would probably cement it for me, what is known to be possible in this world. So this world has a lot of talk about gods, and it leans it's a kind of a combination of the gods and the fae. It's leaning more gods, and I'm still not certain what of that everyone would agree on. It seemed to me like it was clear that it was possible for them to go through a magical door, and they were just sort of like, we just have to find the door, it's fine. But then why is it a mystery why their shoes are getting worn through? And is that just because they're not telling them who knows about magic, who doesn't? It wasn't 100% clear for me. It just needed grounding a little, and it needed that being made more explicit, and I think I would have enjoyed the book more and understood more of why people were reacting the way they did to the things that were happening. So is the fact that the family's cursed a superstition, or is it we genuinely believe you are cursed? And I think that makes a big difference, because if you're then talking about why no one will marry one of the older girls, then it starts to be, okay, is that superstition, or is that genuine, you might be cursed, I cannot marry you? And I think that's quite important. The other thing I would have changed, I'd have made it more gay. It's not gay at all, and that's probably the other reason I cannot give it 5 stars. If it had a gay plotline, I would have been here for it, but no, it doesn't. There is a straight romance in it. If you like that, then great. It's a nice romance. It is very lovely, and I liked that it does have a little bit of incommunicativeness, but that's YA romance for you. But yeah, I made it more gay. I'd do that with pretty much every book I've ever read ever. Overall thoughts. Despite those little, not necessarily little nitpicky things, but those things, I really enjoyed reading this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It would be a 5-star with just a few tweaks. It would make a really great late autumn, early winter read, I think. Or a great, I'm going on holiday to an obscure island in the middle of Scotland or something. I don't know if anyone's doing that, but if you are, take this book with you. It'd be a great time. I thought in this review I'd include some comparisons in case that was interesting for you. I thought about comparing it to State of Sorrow by Melinda Salisbury because I should put the cover up on screen for you. It has similar themes in the sense of a girl trying to cope with coming out of mourning, which was really interesting, and a lot of the writing's very similar and the descriptiveness of it I thought was very similar. State of Sorrow is obviously not a scary book, but they had some similar elements to them. I also thought about The Beast's Heart by Leif Shallcross if you're looking for a retelling from a different perspective to what it is in the original, and with a bit of a dark twist. You could also maybe bring in A Curse So Dark and Lonely, but obviously that leans modern. But yeah, I thought Beast Heart would be an interesting one to compare it to. If you're looking for similarly spooky atmospheric books, Other Words for Smoke by Sarah Maria Griffin is a really good option. I actually have a whole video on spooky reads that aren't scary from last Halloween, I believe, which I might remake this year because I have a better camera now. But yeah, I will put a Woogle it up and you can go and watch that as well. Just a shameless self-promotion there. While we're here, I thought I would research what Erin A. Craig's next book is because I thought it would be interesting. She has a book coming out hopefully autumn of next year. Obviously, what are pub dates at the moment? Who knows? But it's called Small Favours, and it's a spooky Rumpelstiltskin retelling, which actually I am 100% here for. I looked it up on her website and it also seems to involve beekeeping, which sounds great. I mean, sign me up, it sounds exciting. It still sounds incredibly straight, but it's YA fantasy. I'm kind of getting used to it. I talked a little bit about being in a YA slump, and I think books like this are pulling me out of it. I think what I was in a slump with was the kind of court YA fantasy, which I'd read quite a lot of. It just happened that way. So moving out of it with a few more retellings. They're nice, fun, easy reads. Yeah, this was really good. Right, I hope you have enjoyed this very quick review of a book that I enjoyed very much. I have one other review that I want to do in the near future, and I may have more, so do subscribe, like, comment, all of the above. It helps me know that you enjoy them as well. You can also follow me on all of my social media to find out what I'm reading when I'm reading it, and I will see you in the next one. This book is what made me realise there is a fly in this room. This book didn't make me realise that.